Okay, so my name is Carrie Fairchild, and I'm going to present first. I just want to tell you, first of all, my husband is a locksmith, and one of the things that he encounters sometimes is he finds people who say their keys suddenly don't work. All of a sudden, the key no longer works in their car. And so when he goes out to look, what he'll discover is that, and all the things, oh, I'm getting feedback, sorry. He'll discover what he'll discover is that the key is a copy of a copy of copy. There are many copies of that key, and that it doesn't look anything like or represent the original key that was made for that car. And you can see the same thing with like Xerox copies. If you've made copies of copies of copies, then often the copies of copies of copies is so blurry and so unrecognizable that you can no longer read it. And this reminded me somewhat of family life education as they're talking about why do we need to teach these ideals? And that brought me to something that Elder Holland said in a worldwide leadership training. He said, now I hope this helps you understand why we talk about the pattern, the ideal of marriage and family, when we know full well that not everyone now lives in that ideal circumstance. It is precisely because many don't, or perhaps have never even seen that ideal, and because some cultural forces steadily move us away from that ideal, that we speak about what our Father in heaven wishes for us in his eternal plan for his children. And I feel like this relates really well with family life education. I think that often people haven't seen a good family, a healthy family, a functional family. And so that is up to family life educators to present that information. And with that, we must present the best information and teach the ideal as a means for improvement. Family life education is similar to the gospel in that it has always sought to encourage self-improvement and correct principles. But it's unlike the gospel in that the information for family life educators has been changed over the years. It started with self-help books and how-to books in the 1800s. And then it went on to the land-grant university system. And for one of the women said, Ellen Swallow Richards said, family life is seen as contributing to the greater good of society. Enhancing home life equals enhancing society. And I really liked that was why the system was created. Went on to cooperative extensions and evolved over the years to meet the needs of family, of the varying needs of families. Again, this is similar to the gospel. There is a need in family life education to teach the relevant information, but just like a missionary having a strong testimony of the gospel, first a family life educator must have a strong philosophy of his own. I found that as I looked over the questions from the text, what is family? What assumptions do you make about family life? Is it a social arrangement? Is it a fundamental unit of society? What makes ideal family life? Why do I do what I do? When I asked myself those questions, I found that the Proclamation to the Family, A Proclamation to the World, answered all those questions for me and answered what my philosophy on family was. So in order to teach all this vital information, it must be presented in the proper way. Audiences must be consulted and so as to consider their needs. Information, the best information, of course, must be gathered and analyzed. The most effective teaching methods must be chosen. Programs piloted and then delivered to the people who most need that information. And I feel that that family life educators do that when they market and design their programs, and missionaries also need to do that with the gospel. They pray about who it is they're going to teach, they find out what information needs to be taught to them, and then they present it in a way that they can understand it. As we teach and market programs, we must keep in mind that the information we have is necessary, relevant, and important to families, so it must be delivered in a sensitive and professional manner. We must also teach that ideal so that families can change and so that they can improve. I have some questions for us to discuss. What is your philosophy of family life education? Does the proclamation play any part in your ideas about family life education? And what gospel principles can help you as you teach family life education? And I'm happy to hear any answers that you have, if you would like to discuss
Okay.
or comment.
I will comment. Can you repeat question number 2?
Yes. It is, does the proclamation play a part in your ideas about family life education?
Okay, so my dad's not a member of the church, which has kind of been strenuous on my mom in my dad's marriage and also on my spiritual growth in the church. And so growing up, I struggled a lot with wanting eternal marriages or wanting an eternal marriage or understanding being sealed to a family because I've never experienced that. All my friends did, but we didn't talk about it in the home and out of the respect for my dad. And so going to BYU Idaho and starting to study marriage and family, it really opened my eyes to the importance of families and how sacred they are. But it was really neat because I was able to actually relate that to the family proclamation and just the defined roles that it's laid out for us, how parents are supposed to benefit their children and rear them together as a couple. And then I got married in the temple. My dad wasn't able to attend, but I know that after studying the proclamation of the for the family, it really opened my eyes to the family that I needed to create, other than the family that I had or the family that I wanted to have when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just really neat to understand the family proclamation and how moving and how great of a fallback that is for me, especially teaching this principle to other people who might not understand it, especially families in the church who are trying to get to that place. I don't know if that answered it.
Do you think that the proclamation is going to influence how you teach or how you use your family life education degree?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's definitely applicable to anyone. In it says that man and a woman married is of God, and it doesn't specify if it's whether or not it's in the temple or if it's a civil marriage, like what my parents have. So I thought that was super neat because it's these parents, mother and father, aren't specific to what we can get from the church. It's everyone. Everyone who is a mother and father has these duties called upon them. And so I think whoever's your counseling and teaching, it's definitely something that we can practice.
Thank you. I really like that. Did anybody else want to comment? You have to unmute yourself.
There we go. Yeah, well, I have something to say, but it's part of my presentation, so I'll save it for my
Okay.
This assignment confused me because I thought we were supposed to teach a lesson on our outline.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So that we were supposed to outline that chapter and then teach an outline on that, and so they were supposed to be two separate things. Oh well, I guess this is what I got.
Okay.
So anyway, so when it's my turn, I'll share.
Okay, well, I'm done unless somebody has anything else they want to say.
I think it was great.
Yeah, that was super awesome and not anything remotely close to what I did, so good job.
Thank you.
I know, I'm trying to figure out what I can do better about mine, how I can incorporate everything.
Yeah. That was really good.
You did a really good job. It was very effective to use the locksmith example at the beginning. Yep. Nice.
That's always a good key to remember, like a catching story or something that can apply.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You
Okay,
did a
I'll
really
try.
nice job. You actually practiced.
A little bit.
I know you're gonna make us look bad. All right, who wants to go next?
Okay, I will. I want to get mine over too.
Okay.
Okay. So, well, I know what it is. So do you remember in our, Carrie, the class that we took together, she was saying that so is the new for professional presentations. Anyway, Adam and Eve, the first people on the earth, were part of a family. And so you would think that if the first family has been here since the beginning of time, that science would have wanted to take a closer look on what was going on. But the truth is that family science has only been around for a relatively short time, and family life education has only been around for the past 40 years. So it is a new science that has definitely been needed for a long, long time. So with family science and with family life education, we deal with the problems facing the family as they are addressed through research. How important that is. I was born in the mid-50s, and at that time, my mother listened to what Dr. Spock had to say about child rearing. And one of his points was, if your child is crying, great, they need to develop their lungs. So go ahead and let them cry. And we have learned since then that that kind of care of children, if it's consistent and a child does not feel that their needs are being addressed by a loving adult, their opportunities for bonding are severely limited and their healthy attachment is impacted in a negative way. And then comes along researcher Diana Baumrind, who believed that, or hypothesized, that she could watch a group of preschool children, observe what they were doing and ask their teachers for input upon it, and then from watching their behavior, be able to determine what kind of parenting they had experienced. And she found that she could, in fact, determine the parenting style by the parenting outcomes. That is how the young children were behaving. So that vision of making the world a better place by knowing what actions work and what actions don't is very helpful. And it really can add to the vision of family life education of making the world a better place, one family at a time. Now, the Proclamation on the Family, interestingly enough, found exactly what Dr. Baumrind found, and that is that authoritative parenting yields the best child outcomes. And so we have that from two different sources, that a particular approach where we can say this practice, this practice, this practice, this attitude, this behavior, that they work together to make successful child outcomes and build happy families. And so that is really important to know. Now, when we are dealing with families in the community, there are so many different ways that we can approach them with all of this wonderful knowledge. And we have to be sure that the way that we are approaching our audience in the community is that we do it in a way that actually can reach them. And so as we look at some of the approaches, for example, the expert approach, which is heavy on lectures and puts the teacher in an expert position and then the participants in a bottom position, our text said that sometimes that might be helpful because especially if it's a new area of research that people would not have had personal experience with before, that they might need someone to explain it to them. But in other circumstances, that might not be the most effective way to deal with our audience. And that as we're preparing our presentations, that we can have in our toolbox a variety of different ways to approach our audience. So that's what I would like to ask you about, is how you would envision some of these approaches, maybe when you have experienced them before, and which of those kind of, how you envision having your the actual presentation in the workshop that you do, which approaches you plan on using. So I don't know, I think I've taken up my whole time.
You just set a timer.
Okay, but so like what, so here are some things that the collaborator is prepared with curriculum and agenda, but adapted to class member needs. So is that something, is that an approach that we could take with this, or in a way, or partially, or what would you think about the collaborator? So that would mean that we would have lots of input from the people that we're teaching. I kind of pictured it like a Relief Society lesson, maybe, that you have the curriculum, you know what you're supposed to teach, but then it's adapted to the class member needs, which might evolve as the lesson goes on. So do you guys think it's going to be like that, or how do you envision it?
I feel like for me, that's kind of my teaching style is either collaborator or facilitator. I don't feel like I am the expert pouring the knowledge into the people at all. And plus, everybody's had a different set of experiences that shape them, so you have to take that into consideration. So how I like to teach, and how I imagine doing this workshop is as facilitator or collaborator, just because I don't feel like I can stand up there and preach at someone how to have the best marriage or the best family.
Well, isn't that, I mean, that is such good news, isn't it? That would be terrible if that was our role, was to be the expert and, oh yes, I know exactly what to do, because it would be more do what I say, not what I do, huh? It's like, this is what works, and especially when it's research-based, because then it doesn't really matter what we're doing ourselves, or hopefully we're practicing what we're preaching, but that we don't have to hold ourselves up as being the perfect example for people to want to listen.
Yeah, I was thinking about how my workshop would go, because I've only been married for a year and I want to teach about marriage to other people, and I find it so intimidating to try to market to people who have been married for 5 years, 3 years, 50 years. I just think it's going to be so intimidating for me to kind of tell them how to have a better lifestyle and with their spouse. And so I definitely think the collaborator approach is something that I do want to include, but I also really like the eclectic approach, because that's just the approach that you use everything, because sometimes there will be times where research and it's been proven, or information that you just need to share it, and you do need to take on that expert approach, because we are studying this this major, So I think I'm going to really depend on the collaborator and also the eclectic a lot.
Yeah.
I think you don't have to worry about your experience as much as your knowledge. Like if you're feeling insecure, like maybe if you tell a personal story, then maybe it'll get brought up. But if you are talking about your knowledge, you're completely qualified, and could even say you use that knowledge for your own marriage to learn, and you still fail and succeed at the same things that everyone does, that you're just there to help and not necessarily coach, if that's the word.
Okay, well, thank you. I think those are great answers. I appreciate that. So just the very last thing that I'd like to ask is about the transformational approach, the role of challenging the people that we teach to take action and then to follow up. And I just wondered if that part of following up, and I think part of what we're supposed to be doing is to challenge people to take action, as I remember reading it. And then how about following up? Is that going to be something we're going to do, or what are you thinking about the taking action part? I guess we've just kind of started to think about it, but.
Well, for my workshop, I'm in a unique situation as that I'm teaching in a middle school. And so I have 6 one-hour workshops that will be back to back, and they'll all be different. So it'll be kind of a stream. And so I will challenge them each week and then be able to follow up. So for me, that it'll just be part of the lesson, because that's how my class will work.
Okay.
So I plan to do it. I don't know how you do it if you taught a 2-hour seminar though and never saw the people again.
Yeah. I know. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to think about, because it does seem like what use is it really to teach people if it's not going to make a change in them, if it's not going to affect change. So just seems like that's kind of an important thing to consider as we're preparing. So.
Well, I think saying that if it's not going to affect change, then it's not useful to teach them. Maybe they get enough of the information that it's okay, but I don't know. I think they need to hear it either way, even if they don't internalize it right away.
Okay, so we don't have to be transformational. That's a lot of pressure to be transformational.
Just something that I'm trying to depend on is if I market to them and they come to my workshop, I kind of feel like they have a desire to learn something new and to change. And so that's what I'm kind of focusing on. Like, they wouldn't be there if they weren't looking for answers or guidance or help. So even if they go walk out bored, there's a seed planted somewhere in them if they listened. But so that's what I'm kind of depending on.
I think that's a good point to the workshop. It's not something that's forced, and it's something we have to market and sell, and that's how we get people. They're not required to be there, and so they do have a genuine interest already in just the topic. So I think that is a really good point to remember, that people are there because they want to be and they want to learn.
Yeah. Oh, and they know what the topic is, and that's would be a particular interest for them that we have geared directly toward them. So. Okay, well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. You're a great audience.
Thank you. All right. Do you want to go next, or do you want me to? Jenny. I can't hear you.
That's why all my kids were going to bed. Someone knocked on the door. It was like crazy. But I'm just feeling a little self-conscious, but we'll see.
Oh,
I don't mind. If you're okay, I'll go.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, if that's all right.
That's fine. Go ahead.
All right, so I structured my outline. What you see is what you get, kind of from. That's what I took. I tried to remember backgrounds of different classes, but let's just say that my memory is not what it used to be. So if we were thinking about families and we take into account, let's just say how families are portrayed in media, just start with that. if you take movies, for instance, a lot of the mothers are presented as deceased, right? We have Bambi, we have Cinderella, we have Snow White. And then if there is a dad, he's presented usually as uninvolved or kind of the breadwinner and not really caring about the kids. Lego Movie, for instance, where the dad didn't want the kid to play with any of the toys. He's more of a disciplinarian and very serious. And then you have Married with Children, who was a total kind of goofball dad. And Incredibles, who was totally unfocused on family and just on career. And so it got me thinking about why families are shown as separate entities. Like a mom is one entity, a dad is an entity, and the children are, not together. And why aren't they shown as conjoined as a family unit? So that brings to the question of what family education is and what the purpose is. But what it is it strengthens families through social science education. And if you go as far as outreach family life education, that is educating people outside of a specific classroom setting. It could be in a church or a school setting or somewhere where it's not so formal. I think it's meant to engage people in the community in a subject that can help improve their life. And it could be an individual, a couple, or a family. And when we're looking at a unit or a person and how they are, how they evolve as a person, they have a lot of different systems. They have the microsystem, which is themselves and how they grow and change, and then they have the mesosystem, which is like the family or daycare. They have the exosystems, which are the extended family or neighbors, community, and then they have the macro, which is like the government or laws or culture, things like that. And so there's so many different aspects to what a family unit, how it can be affected, and so, like we've already heard, that it's a fairly new science to even study of how much one single person in a micro unit can affect an entire world by growing out. And so I think that is the purpose of the outreach family life education, is to not just foster principles and ideas and change in just a family, but also in the community. But although the main principles of it are to help couples and families in different diverse situations. But family life education started, the first, I guess, known foot in the door, I guess, is when President Lincoln provided 1.7 acres for college land. That was the Morrill Act in 1862. And I just love that it was put in sometimes in the middle of rural areas just to give people opportunity for education that wouldn't normally have it. And then, of course, that education was geared towards agriculture and economics because that was what their community needed. It wouldn't have really made sense to put maybe a doctor or a lawyer college when that's not really what they need. They need to know how to manage their land and manage their money. And so I thought that made a lot of change. But then, of course, that went through community movements to Society for Study of Child Nature. Then the White House got involved on child welfare. And then a few other associations or councils were created. And then now what's mainly used is the National Council on Family Relations. And so I think it's really evolved to becoming such like a global entity to really focus on that family unit. So when you're designing a family life program, so that's basically a history. And if we're going into details on how to become a workshop facilitator, what are the purposes of what you're trying to do? Recommended, the first thing is prevention. To prevent human dysfunction. It could prevent family failure, it could prevent community issues, and so it's to prevent something. And there's different programs No, that's different. Sorry. Then they have effective programs. They recommend measuring how it's effective towards, if it's engaging, if it's appropriate. One of the sisters said, I'm sorry for her name, but she said she's teaching it in a middle school. You wouldn't want to teach, an adult subject matter to the middle school, people. And so just make sure that the information is age appropriate or life appropriate. And like I was saying before, you don't have to be life qualified. You have to be well qualified, trained, and supported. And I think that's a good thing to remember, because obviously every facilitator isn't going to have this amazing life experience of all these trials and can understand every single thing. But what we're supposed to provide is knowledge and resources and education, and hopefully promote good relationships and a self-improvement. The other thing that is recommended is to not just focus on problems or risk factors, but help and focus identify strengths and how families can be lifted and built up instead of just focus on the issues at hand. I think that could take away completely from a workshop if there's only focusing on what you can or can't do. And I remember one time I was in a marriage and family class just for Sunday school, and it was one that the bishop had put together that I'm sure a lot of wards have. And we went in with a few couples, and the teacher was talking about, problems in marriage, and this one couple just completely took hold of the discussion, and how, somebody woke up in the middle of the night to talk, and he was tired after work, and they just couldn't even get back to what we were talking about, which was an eternal marriage. And so I think it's important to remember to try to keep positive aspects in the discussion. We've heard already that there's different roles in family life education, and I personally relate to eclectic. And then the way I want to run specifically my workshop is more of a discussion based. I'm talking about depression, so I really want to be able to have people feel comfortable in this room and not feel like I am judging or chastising or anything like that. I want them to feel comfortable and secure and safe in that place. So when I was developing my working philosophy, I was trying to write down some of the things that I believe and ideas that I want to share. And it's basically that that's where I want to bring in the atonement. And, a lot of workshops aren't faith-based, and maybe they're more by community, and you can't talk really about religion, it's taboo. But I have a strong belief in the atonement. And no matter what mistakes are made, and no matter how far deep you get, I have a strong belief that Christ can pull anybody out. I've experienced it, I've seen it, and that's something that's really important to me that I really want to share in my workshop. So if I'm talking about, just say my topic, which is depression, my question to you is, how do I market it? How do I reach this diverse audience that we're supposed to be talking to? It's such a broad subject, so I'm trying to work it down to something that's more focused. But it really is, mental health is becoming such an issue, and President Holland just came out with that video, which I don't know if you've seen, of how big of a problem this is becoming and how insecure people are feeling about talking about it. And so I really just want to know what you guys think, like who I should market it to, how I can reach such a diverse audience. Should I focus on kids or parents or both, or what do you think?
As the mother of a child who has depression, I would love to have someone told me that what the symptoms were, that I wasn't just looking at an angsty teenager, I was looking at a much bigger problem than that before we got to, Mom, I'm having suicidal thoughts. I would have loved for someone to give me some kind of frame of reference to know that this was not right, whereas this is normal teenage behavior, and this is not normal teenage behavior. And then what to do with it and where the resources would be to get help. And I don't know if that helps you market or not, but that, from sitting here in my position, I wish someone could have helped me with that.
Mhm.
Well, I was wondering specifically about putting flyers in the library, because then you run into people who, and then the libraries also have those rooms where, at least my library here does, where you can have your presentation in one of the library rooms, and then people would be in a place that they were familiar with and comfortable with. And if they're in the library, then they're looking for information. And I don't really think there's anyone whose life isn't touched by depression in some way or another. And so either they have it themselves, or a family member, or a friend, or they just, the pain that it causes is spilling out into everyone's life.
Mhm.
And it would be helpful to understand it. So
Perfect. That's a really good idea.
Sorry. I also think that maybe even talking about, like, I like what Carrie said. She said that the symptoms and stuff, because I had an incident last year where a family member passed away, and for a long time I wasn't myself, and I just was moping and stuff, and I really didn't even think of anything like it until maybe 6 months later. I was like, okay, something's wrong with me. Like, I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't feel I don't want to dress up. I don't care how I look or anything like that. So I definitely think helping people understand what it is that they're getting. I know it's vast, but for me, it would have helped a lot more for me to get back on track to myself again if I actually understood what was happening with me, and understood what, like, just understood why I was in a weird funk for so long. And I think that would help, just raising awareness, because really, like, I didn't even notice it within myself. So it was really hard to even put a finger on why I was so sad or mopey, or just not myself anymore. So maybe, like, underlying factors or something can really help parents and people who might be experiencing it without even realizing it.
Do you think you would have gone to a class, or would it be more easier to market towards parents?
I think probably parents, just because I just didn't know what was wrong with me. Like, it took me, like I said, like 6 months to finally say, like, something's wrong with me. And I don't know if I would have seeked out a class, because I was just like, I need to change myself. But I think if parents were able to know it. Actually, like, when I first heard your question, I thought it would be neat to have it for children and for their parents, because I know that it would help me cope better if somebody knew what I was going through. Like, if my husband went to a class with me, he would know the exact things that they talked about. And so he would be able to help me with those challenges, remind me, uplift me, because we're going through it together. If that makes sense.
I really appreciate both of you guys sharing the situation, both from a parent point of view and from someone who's suffered from it. I know it's a hard thing to deal with from both points of view. So I really appreciate that, your willingness to share.
No problem. Okay, so I guess I'm the last one. It's just funny because everything you guys have said is like what I'm gravitating towards talking about, so it's just going to be a little bit redundant, but I'll try to keep it within the limit so we're not talking about it after talking about it. Okay, so I want you guys to think of someone in your life, throughout your life, whether it be you, your parents, your neighbor, people from the church, a relative, someone who went through some difficult times in their lives. It could have been a childhood friend or their parents or anyone. And think about someone who seemed to struggle for a long time. Someone who might not have been given the opportunity, didn't know where to go for help. Someone who wasn't able to receive the coping that they needed to have in their lives. So with that person in mind, I want to introduce Family Life Education. And Family Life Education is for individuals, couples, parents, families, and it's the work to better them and their families and their lives. These people are able to be learned at work, at a church, at schools, at different functions that the FLE group is able to provide for them. Some topics that might relate to people is marriage, education, parenting skills, stress and anger management, and also coping to new life family events that has happened. So I'm going to talk about Bronfenbrenner. It was already mentioned earlier, but this is the idea that the individual has the microsystem. And the microsystem is friends, peers, where they go to school, where they go to church. Then they go to the mesosystem, and that's how they interact with the exosystem, and that's the industries in our world and social services in our world. And then that will go to the macrosystem, which encompasses the entire attitude and culture of that person. With Bronfenbrenner, he really tried to make it easy for people to understand how people and why they do things the way they do it. And so with the Family Life Education, I think it really is able to coincide with Bronfenbrenner because of the fact that individuals and families and couples, they go through problems because of the things around them, things between them. And that really makes sense when you look at Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. Some roles that the FLE Family Life Education services, they have, like we talked about, they have the expert, the facilitator, the critical collaborator, eclectic and interventionist, and so on. And something that really, the approach that really affected me or moved me or I related to the best was the eclectic, because it was a use of all of the approaches that there is. And for me, I think being able to depend on the eclectic approach means relying heavily on the Spirit, because it is when you don't know necessarily what you need to do. You can use any of them, you can pick out of any of them, but the Spirit will definitely guide you to what you need to do for your audience. And also, we can utilize the principle of power of discernment with this. The Spirit will teach those who need to be taught, and we are an instrument that Heavenly Father utilizes, but we also can pray for the power of discernment to figure out what approach, what we need to say, our audience, and how we can relate to other people to make them understand better or help them really understand what we are trying to teach them and get across. So for marketing, I'm just going to jump to marketing, and I'm going to talk about Bronfenbrenner again, because the things around us is what we're trying to, or our church. We can utilize the church to get people to come to our workshops, or be able to communicate through the church to um, benefit the welfare of our brothers and sisters in the church. Or we can go to schools and we can benefit our brothers and sisters who might not be a part of our church. We can start within our own home, and I think that might be the biggest and the first place that we need to make sure that we are soliciting our duty to protect our families, to make it better. I know that it was talked about already, but it's definitely our family is where we need to start, because it starts with prevention, and we know we need to be the protectors in our own homes towards those things that can go bad. And I think that's it for me. I have a question, and we kind of went over this, but we can talk about it a little more. But how can I seem more professional? Because I'm so young and newly married, how can I relate to people who might be older or more experienced in marriage, people who have kids? How can I relate to them or help them kind of respect or trust me and what I'm saying?
Well, I think all you have to do, honestly, is speak, because
Yeah.
I've been married for 40 years, and I'm thinking I'd listen to what you had to say. You're very believable, and I trust you. I trust that you know what you're talking about, and that you're going to give some good advice. Not good. It's not advice. It's
Direction, instruction.
direction. Yeah, instruction. There we go. That's it. It's instruction. That's right. So I don't think you have to worry about that so much. I don't think you do. I think people are going to be just lapping up what you have to tell them. So
I don't know how taboo it is to share. I've used that word like 5 times tonight alone, and I swear I never say that word. It's so weird. But I don't know if it's appropriate to share a little bit of your history, but even just saying that you were a child of 2 different belief systems and seeing how that affected your growing up, that sometimes there is a little bit life experience is just relating to that, if that's a subject matter you're going to. And that, I think, really doesn't have an age requirement, because you're a child and an adult. I keep hearing this phrase, kids are resilient. They get over everything. And I think that is true, but adults aren't. Adults aren't resilient, and they remember what happened to them when they were kids, and they remember what happened to them when they were adults, and it affects them both equally. And so I think having that knowledge and experience as a child is just as fresh as an adult. And I think if you portray that, then that will definitely, you do just need to speak, though. You're very professional.
So what
Thank you.
aspect of marriage are you going to focus on?
I think I'm leaning towards trying to figure out or research more about the betterment of marriage. Just because in my family, I can really tell that my brother's not a member anymore, and he got married. And I really see the struggles that he has by not being married in the temple. And it's bad that I compare, but I think that having that basis and knowledge of like the eternal perspective of getting married in the temple really helps me. But it's not so much the eternal aspect, but I want people to be able to, no matter where they are in their marriage, make it better. And I know it's hard for me sometimes to even do it, but finding that want to make it better, finding the need, or actually coming to the understanding that it needs to be done, or something like that. So something along the lines of making your marriage better, and not just coasting, if that makes sense. I don't know, because I can just see that in my parents. I can see that they can have a better marriage, and I want to kind of find that and figure out how to get that to other people or something like that.
That sounds really good. To focus on the strengths, like
Mhm.
that's been brought up. So
That's probably a better and easier way to say it.
I
Thank
think
you.
that also you're I would agree with everyone. You're very professional. And I think one of the things that even comes through on the screen is you're extremely empathetic. And I think that your participants will feel that, and then you will be able to impart to them whatever you want to say.
Sincere is a good word too.
Yes, yes, I agree.
absolutely.
Thanks. You're making me blush.
Well, isn't this going to be fun, huh? To work together? I think what a great idea that we get to meet as a group and go over these
So,
different aspects. And
do we want to try and talk this way? Is this easier? Picture as someone outlines, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I like this. I think talking to the screen for 7 minutes would be a little boring for me. Because I really do like interacting with you guys.
yeah, I thought it was very, very helpful. I don't know. It does feel kind of isolated in an online class sometimes, and especially when this is a really complex, intense class. It's just nice to have some support. Somebody, be able to bounce ideas off each other. I think this meeting tonight's been very helpful. I appreciate it.
Loves company, right?
Yeah, I also think because the other option is to do like a 7-minute video of ourselves, but then also reply. Am I correct? I don't know. I think I read that, and I just feel like that might get robotic. I don't know if that's just me.
This feels
Well,
like
all that will take an hour too, over a period of days, right? 10 minutes, 8 minutes, and then watching it, and then replying. Like that, I don't know. It seems more efficient too.
and I'm an hour ahead of you guys, or whatever. I'm in the Pacific time zone, so you don't
Oh, I
care
am too.
about meeting late at night. I don't care about meeting late at night. I still got another hour.
So are we good with this time?
Yes, I think we're good. We'll just set up.
But wasn't it only weeks 3, 6, and 9, or did I read that wrong?
Yeah,
Nope, you're right.
9. And so maybe this was kind of, I wasn't real clear about what we were supposed to do I guess we just did it, and maybe that's all we were supposed to do is kind of get our feet wet, right?
Right.
I think there were some good ideas to take though, even as far as presenting, like starting with the story, applying self, asking questions, like all of that stuff. It wasn't even on my radar. So thank you.
Take care. All right.
So we'll work
So-
together again soon.
What was that?
I said we'll work together again soon. Have a good
Yep.
night.
All right, thanks. Have a good night.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Good night. Bye-bye.